QuickBooks Online 2021. Generate, export to Excel, and save as PDF files reports after entering the second month of operational data. We're going to have reports that will be including comparative financial statements, including comparative balance sheet and comparative income statements. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Online 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars practice file. We're going to be generating reports after the second month of data input, considering just putting the reports together, comparing our numbers so we can check where we are at this point in time, and also thinking about how we would group the reports together to provide them to, say, a supervisor or a client. Note that it is the second month of operations now, so now we can include comparative reports. As we do so, we want to start thinking about what kind of grouping of reports might you want, say per billing cycle if it's a client's report, or per month. You might have different reports per quarter and per year, and the comparative inability for the comparative reports can play into that as well. So I'm going to go down to the reports down below. Notice that last time we looked at some of our standard reports, the balance sheet and income statement for the first month. We memorized some of them, so you may have some reports in your custom reports tab to the right-hand side. Here, balance sheet and the profit and loss. So obviously you can use those if you so choose for your standard type of reports. I'm going to start off though at the standard tab so we can think about this from scratch again. Let's just open up the balance sheet. We're actually going to use a summary balance sheet this time, but I want to compare and contrast to a normal balance sheet. So I'm going to open up a balance sheet. This is our balance sheet report, and now let's make it for the second month. So I'm going to say 01/01/21 to 12/30, or I'm sorry, to 02/28/21. Run that report. Now note when I actually print the report, the second day is the only thing that matters for a balance sheet because it's an as of report. Remember, the reason you have a date range up top is because that helps you with zooming into the report, and if you format the report in some other ways, such as a comparative report that we'll take a look at shortly. I'm going to close up the hamburger up top, scroll up just a bit, holding down Control to get us to that 125%. Now this is our report that gives us a little bit more detail, say, than a summary report. So what I'm going to do is just kind of compare and contrast that to what we'll focus in on is the summary report. Notice down here that you have some items with our sub-accounts for like the loans that we set up with these sub-accounts, and the payroll is a sub-account as opposed to the categories. So it might be useful then not to have some of this added detail because they may not want the loan numbers and things like that on a report. That might not be something that's necessary. We want just the loan payable that we're reporting to an external user. So there's a couple ways that you might deal with that. One is that we can have the standard balance sheet and then hit this collapse button up top. And notice what that does. It doesn't collapse basically the types here. So the types still have this triangle, but it collapses the sub-account information. And that's one way that we can kind of trim this report up and still have that added detail for our internal use, but have it summed up for the external use. You also might have a summary report. So let's open up the summary report and consider that option as well. Just to take a look at that loan one though first. If we had the loans right there, so it's closed up, it's collapsed, no triangle is there anymore. Let's go back up and I'm going to right click on the tab up top. Let's duplicate that tab and let's look at the summary balance sheet and let's make that our starting point to start off with. So I'm going to go back down to the reports down below. And this time, instead of just opening up the standard balance sheet, we're going to scroll on down to the summary balance sheet. So we're going to go balance sheet summary report. Now this one ties it down. I'm going to close up the hamburger up top by account type. So you'll notice you still got the triangle for the assets and the current assets, but then the bank account has no triangle. The account types are what's being closed out too. So now this is going to be a more condensed report. It's much easier to look at. So this might be like the first starting point that you want to give somebody. If you don't want to overwhelm somebody, then the summary report is a good starting point, and then be ready for it to have the more detail as you go into the more detailed report. So this might be like the report you have kind of on top to invite people into actually opening up the report and looking into it in more depth. But you can do the same kind of thing with this report and have a comparative balance sheet. So let's make our comparative balance sheet with this item now that we have 2 months of operations. If I go back up top and I say this is going to be for 01/01/21 to 02/28/21, then run that report. We could do our comparison by going up top here to the totals and say that I want to see this for months. and then run that report. So now we've got January 1st and then February running in that way. That's one way that you could format it. The other way we might want to format it is we're going to say, let's bring this back up to the totals. And I think this would be the more common way to do it, and because you have more options, and go to the first period of 0121. So it's just for the month of February, run that report. And then take a look at this drop down, active road, not active road, select the period. We want the previous period, which will be January 1st to January 31st. Make sure it's including the entire month here. And then we could add the change in dollars and the change in the percentage change, as we saw before in the balance sheet when we looked at all the reports just basically in general. But now we're just doing the same kind of thing with a comparative report, running that report. We're doing the same thing with a summary balance sheet as opposed to a standard balance sheet. So then we have the comparison. Now the February is up top, is in the front, and then January, and then we have the change, and then we have the percentage changes. And it's still not too overwhelming to look at it in this format. So now let's go ahead and format this report like we typically would. If we were going to give it to someone externally, I might say I want to customize this thing. And we're going to say there's that. I'm going to remove the pennies. I'm going to show the negative numbers as red and bracketed. And then let's go on down to the header and footer. Header and footer options. Let's get rid of the footers, date, time, report basis, as has been our custom. And then we might call this a comparative balance sheet. Comparative balance sheet, like so. I'm going to copy this because I'm going to want to save it as well. I'm going to copy this. So comparative balance sheet summary. I think that's good. Let's go ahead and save it. So there we have it. Looks excellent. And then I'm going to customize it one more time and scroll down on the header footer. I still got the report basis. I don't like that. Let's get that out of there. That's not necessary on the footer because that was hanging out down here in the footer. So we removed that. So that looks good. Now let's go ahead and memorize this thing. I'm going to save this, customize it. And we're going to put it into, I'm going to put it into the month reports. We'll do this kind of like a monthly report. And let's save it, a comparative balance sheet. That looks good. So I'll save that. And then let's do our standard process of exporting it, saving it to Excel so that we can then make one PDF with it. We could kind of send this out report by report, but that's not very professional. I would still save it in some way and then email it in some grouped fashion that I've actually thought about a little bit more than just kind of winging, just throwing reports out of the QuickBooks file to people through email. So I'm going to say, let's make a PDF. Let's do the PDF thing with it. I'm going to save it as a PDF. So there it is. It's coming up down here because I'm in Google Chrome. Let's do the old drag and drop method here. I'm going to find where I want to put it. I've made another folder just called February documents. You might want to save these by month or something like that, or by the grouping of the information that you're going to be providing on a periodic basis, possibly to a client or supervisor. I'm going to drag this thing into it, and there it is. Now, I should probably name it a little bit better, but I want to go a little bit more quickly here, so I'm going to keep it as is. I'm going to make the view large icons so we can see it with large icons. And then I'm going to then close this back out. Let's open up another report. Let's do the same thing for the P&L, profit and loss. Right-clicking on the tab up top, duplicating the tab, and the profit and loss standard. So we're going to open this one up. We don't have the same kind of summary information here, but we can do the same thing with the collapsing type of options. So I'm going to close the hamburger up top, scroll up top, changing the date range from 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. Run that report. So now the date range really matters here because now we have 2 months of information, this being an activity type of report, unlike with the balance sheet where we would just see the end period, right? The end period would be the report. This has a range. So the fact that we're going from January to February means we have 2 months of data that are accumulating upwards in our temporary accounts, those being the income statement accounts. Now note then down here, we might have a lot of sub-accounts. Some people have a lot of sub-accounts, and that might be used to track the information in more detail on your actual for your internal use, and it might not be as useful for external use. For example, in this case, we have the payroll expenses. Maybe we don't need it broken out between taxes and wages when we report it to somebody else for external use. It might get a little bit overwhelming if we had a lot of situations like that. Once again, you can collapse up top, going up top and collapse And then items such as that with the subtotals would then be eliminated. So there's the payroll expense just combined together. Now that, again, can be really useful to set up reports that are really useful for you internally, us internally, as we want to go back and forth from them, and then to give someone externally a report that has been modified to simplify it and give the less detail that's not necessary for external reporting usage. So we have that, and then if we wanted to make a comparative report, there's a couple ways we can do this, which again are kind of more relevant on the income statement than the balance sheet. One is that I can hit this drop down and say I want to compare months and then run this report. The reason this is different now is because now I've got January and February and then this total column, which we did not have on the balance sheet, because this total column is saying, hey, this is how much revenue you generated and expenses down below for January and February, which isn't something that's applicable on a balance sheet, which is a report as of a point in time. So you might want to report something like this, and then another report that would be a comparative that would be subtracting these two items. Instead of having a total over here, give me the difference in performance between January and February. So I might like rename this one. I might say, let's do both of these. I'm going to say, let's go ahead and customize this thing. And we're going to say this is going to be without cents, bracketed numbers, show them as red, go into the header and footer. And this is going to be then the remove date, time, and report basis. We might want to call it an income statement. So let's call this an income statement by month instead of a comparative income statement, which we'll do next time, which will be subtracting the two columns. So then I'm going to say, let's save that, save it. Looks great. So there we have it. So in January, we had the income. We had a loss in February, really? No, we had income in February. That red number was drawing my eye here. So that's why the red kind of drew my eye. So it's the 4. So we had income. That makes sense. So now let's go ahead and export this, do our exporting type of thing. I'm going to export this as a PDF. We're going to save them as to Excel too, but we'll do that basically all at one time. So I'm going to export this one to a PDF. I'm going to save it. So it's going to show up down below. Let's do our dragging and dropping thing. I'm going to minimize the screen and just drag it to where I want to go. Now we got those two reports together, which again, we can send as two reports on one attachment, or we can then zip the folder, and then we'll export them to Excel as well and do our other method as well after we're done with this. So I'm going to close this back out. And let's make another income statement now. So I'm going to right click up top again. And before I do that, you might want to memorize this report too. So I might say save this report into a monthly report, and it's an income statement by month. We'll save that. Looks great. Then I'm going to right click on the tab again and duplicate the tab once again. And let's start with another income statement. This is going to be a comparative income statement. So we'll go to the reports down below, similar kind of starting point process. And we'll open up the good old income statement again. Income statement. Range, change it up top. This time just for the month of February. 02/01/21 to 02/28/21. Run it. Close the burger. And then once again, I'm going to collapse the columns like this payroll. We'll collapse it for external reporting use. Collapse that. And then this time, I'm not going to use the months to do a comparison, but we're going to use the select period dropdown. Previous period. Want it for the month of January. Looks good. And the dollar change, percent change. Let's go ahead and run that. Run it. And so here we have our comparative income statement that we saw constructed in the past when we just focused in on our reports. Now we got the current month and then the prior month, then the change. So now we're taking the difference as opposed to adding them together. So that looks good. Let's do our standardized customize, the standardized customize. Remove the cents and red negative numbers with brackets. And then on the header and footer, I'm going to remove the date, time, report basis. We're going to call this a comparative income statement. This is a statement about income that compares stuff. And so there we have it. Looks good. So then let's scroll back up top and say that we're going to then export this one. So let's save it as a PDF. So I'm going to say, let's go and export as a PDF and then save it. It's going to open down here in Chrome. Then we get to drag and drop again. Dragging it, dropping it. Dragging it, dropping it. Grab it, drag it, drop it. And then we're going to maximize the report. And then let's do our transaction detail report. So if you have any kind of differences on your numbers, then this is the report to kind of look at. We're going to say right-click, duplicate the tab, transaction detail report. This time we'll take a look at it by basically the journal entries, actually. Let's make it a little bit different than last month. So I'm going to go to the reports tab. I'm going to hold control down and scroll down a little bit so I can see it a little bit better. Reports tab down below. I'm going to go all the way down to the accounting. So the accounting down below, payroll for your accountant. So last time we took a look at the transaction detail by date, which is a great report that you can then look at to kind of count the number of transactions and see the activity that has happened for a certain date range. Another report we can use is a journal, which you would think would just be recording the journal entries when you enter journal entries, but it's really recording everything in journal entry form, which is nice. So it's another way that you can kind of count and even get more detail on the transactions reports. So I'm going to close up the hamburger up top. I'm going to change the range just to the month of February, 02/28/21 to, so that's the ending date. It starts in 02/01/21 to 02/28/21, and then there we have it. So notice that we have the transaction forms here, deposit, bills, and whatnot, and it gives you the information on the right-hand side. And it gives you the more complex information rather than just a one line item type of thing. So if you see these complex transactions, you could make a billable kind of system to say, hey, I'm gonna bill and take into consideration the complexity of the transactions we have. Meaning if I'm selling something that I have to track inventory with, or if I'm doing payroll and whatnot, then we have more complex transactions that I might be able to set into my billing system just based on the complexity or how many accounts are going to be involved for a particular cycle that we are dealing with. So you'll notice payroll has a lot going on in it as well. So again, you can kind of work that into a standardized billing system rather than hourly. You might say, hey, if I charge by how many accounts are affected, or something like that, so that, and if you fall into this range, not per account, but if you fall into this range, I count you as this level of complexity, and this is my rate for that range of activity. It might make it easier to bill with. It's also a great report to kind of tie out to see what someone has done. If you're doing a work like this, if something was wrong on your balance sheet or the income statement, you could take this report and just tick and tie it off line by line, and then you could see exactly what the difference is. Because if our starting point was correct at the end of January and you entered everything in the same exact way as we did here in February, your ending numbers have to be correct. And so this should be able to fix that problem. And then if you have any differences, like if something is missing on your document that is here, what you want to do is change the date range to increase the date range and see if it was a date problem. And that's going to be the first check you want to take a look at. Okay, let's do the same thing here. I'm going to export this one, and we could customize this. And this is probably one we wouldn't give as often to a customer unless we had it in our billing system and we wanted to give them the information, say, hey, look, this is exactly what we put in, and this is what we're using maybe to bill on. So then we can say maybe red numbers and bracketed for the negatives. I can remove the date and time information. And then on the header and footer of the journal report, we'll keep it at that. Save it. Let's go ahead and export this. We're going to export it to a PDF file first. Save as a PDF file. And there we have that. I'm going to minimize this or make it smaller, drag it, and then drop it. Okay, so now we can add these to somebody's information, or we can zip the folder and attach this information, or we can try to add this all to one PDF file. Let's do that now. Let's see if we can do that fairly quickly. We're going to then make all these reports, exporting them to Excel, use Excel to make them into one PDF file. Let's go back to the first report. We're going to say, let's make an Excel file with it. I'll try to do this faster since we've done this a few times now. Now this first one, I'm going to drag and drop this one. I'm going to drag and drop that one because I'm going to make that our primary one. I'm going to right click on it and rename it to be just financial reports. Financial reports for Feb 2021. And then I'll open it up. Let's open it up then. There it is. I'm going to hold down Control, scroll up a little bit. Let's see if it fits on one page. I'm going to go to the second view and then say, yeah, it fits on one page. So I'm going to keep it at that. Now I'm going to add another tab, and I want my second report to go right here on this same sheet. So I'll go back on over to QuickBooks, and I'm going to go to the next report, export this to Excel, export Excel. But this time I'm not going to drag and drop it. I'm going to open it so I can just copy and paste the information to my new tab. So it's going to open back up. Do I want to edit it? Enable the editing? I do. And then I can right click down on this tab, and I could try to copy or move it. And sometimes the other one shows up, but it's not there. So I'm going to say, let's just copy the whole thing. Put my cursor on the triangle, Control C. I'm going to go back on over to my other report with a blank tab. Put my cursor on A1, Control V, paste in the entire thing. Let's see if it fits on one page. Go into the second view and back to the first view. So it looks like it fits on a page. That's good. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it Income Statement by Month. And then I'm going to make a new tab. So we're going to do this again for the next report. I'm going to close the other Excel sheet that we had open. So I don't need this anymore because I copied the guts out of it and put it into the other one. And all I wanted were the guts. So I'm going to close this. And then we're going to go the next one is we're going to go on over to the next one. And let's do this for this one. We'll export this, export to Excel, open that one up. And we're going to enable the editing so that we can copy the guts out of this one and take it to the report we want. I'm going to copy the whole thing and Control C, go to the other report, and this is where we want it. Control V. All the good stuff is going in here from the report. And this is going to be a comparative income statement. So comparative income statement. Does it fit on one page? Let's check the second page thing. It does. Perfect. One more. I'm going to add another tab. And then I'm going to go to this one. I'm going to close it because we've removed that. So I'm going to close this. And then one more time, one more round. I didn't hear no bell. One more, and then next tab over. We're going to download this one, export to Excel again, open this one up, enable the editing on this one, and then I'm going to hit the triangle up top, Control C, bring it on over to my other item here, put my cursor up top, Control V, double click on the name, and this is the journal that we have. All right, this one's not going to fit on a page, so I'm going to just check it out. Next layout view, doesn't fit on a page, back on over. So we got to make this fit on a page. I'm going to go to this first tab, Home tab, Alignment. I'm going to unmerge this one. Home tab, Alignment, unmerge. This one, Home tab, Alignment, unmerge. I'm going to cut these three, Control X, and move it over to column B so I can remove column A altogether because I don't think there's anything necessary that we need there. Delete that. I'm going to change the orientation in the page layout. Make this in the page layout orientation, landscape. Then I'm going to try to wrap the text on these ones. So I'm going to go Home tab, Alignment. They're already wrapped so that if I close up, make this a little bit smaller, I think I should be able to be okay with that size. And there we have it. So it's wrapped. So I made it so I can see it wrapped there. Let's make this one smaller. So I'm going to bring this one way down, way down. And these ones I don't really want to be wrapped. So I'm going to, all this stuff, I don't want this wrapped. So I'm going to unwrap these. Home tab, Alignment, don't wrap those. Por favor. Por favor. Por favor. And then I'm going to close this one up. And then, and maybe I'll put a space in here so that it'll wrap properly. It's not doing a proper wrapping. And then this one, we'll close this up. And there it fits on one page. I'm going overboard. I've already got what I need. It's already working. Okay, so there we have it. Now I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to print all this to one PDF file using the Qt PDF printer. So I'm going to go to the first tab over here. I'm going to go down to the printing option. We want the printing option so it prints as a PDF file. So there's multiple options you can do to do this, but I would recommend looking at one. We've got a printer that prints to a PDF that's really cute, and it's called the Qt PDF Writer. And then we're going to go to the print active sheet. I want to do the entire workbook. And let's just review it to double check, not to get overboard, just 2 checks. No more checking than that, just 2 checks. That's all we need. Otherwise, we'll be checking all day. Okay, that looks good. And then let's go ahead and print it. We'll say print that thing. And then where do we want to put it? I'm going to hit the drop down. Drop down. It's not going to, I hit it and it's not going to respond. It's not responding to me. It's mad at me. Giving me the silent treatment. That's okay. I can wait. I'm patient. And then we're going to go to the February folder. And there's where we want it. So I'm going to save it right there. So we'll save it there. And now let's open it up and see what it looks like. So now when we give this to someone else, we can give this one by one, or we can zip the file, or we can give them like this file and try to put it all on one PDF file in this kind of format that we looked at. So financial statements, let's open that up, because that's kind of the most impressive. Although there's some slight formatting differences between these methods. You know, you have more options to format in Excel, but it'll take longer and whatnot. So here it is. We've got the balance sheet. So, and again, you might not want to start off with a comparative balance sheet. You might want to put the summary on top. It just depends how many reports you want to be given to somebody and how detailed those reports want to be. You could adjust some formatting up top here, right? With this line, looks kind of funny. And then I'm gonna go down here, and then we got the income statement by month report, which is adding those two up to the total. And then we've got the comparative income statement, which is subtracting the 2 months. So we have the change and the percentage change for the income statement. And then this is the report that we might not be providing to someone just for internal use, but if they want to kind of review our work, say, this is all the stuff we did. And this is a little bit more detailed of all the stuff we did than if you give just the transaction detail by date, because a transaction like this would just be on one line if you give them the transaction detail by date. When in actuality, there's a lot more going on. Now, a lot of what's going on is automated if we set up the system properly. But again, a lot more going on. So you might want to, this report could be more impressive. And again, it could be useful because it does give you that more information. So if you are doing more complex things like adding inventory, tracking inventory, doing payroll, this will give you that indication of those transactions that are more complex by showing you the complexity within them.